Hey guys, Bound to Divide here with Ableton Tips, and today I'm going to be taking you through 3 different house grooves. I'm going to be showing you how to program these grooves, how to sequence out all the different drum hits, and also how to process them to get them sounding a bit nice and fuller and fatter. Okay, so I'm just going to play the different grooves for you. The first one is kind of like progressive / melodic style groove. And the second one is a more techie kind of toolroom / tech house sounding groove. And the third one is a more kind of organic house groove. Okay, and as you can see, all of these drums were made with D Premium Volume 6. Alright, so let's get started on the first one. So this is a bit more of a simple groove where we mainly focusing just on like the kick, hat, clap kind of groove. But there's also some interesting stuff that's happening with like the fills, and we also have a tom and some percussion that's going to be giving it a little bit more groove. Okay, so first up is the kick, and that's pretty straightforward. We've got this deep kick 11 from the pack, and I've done a little bit of processing on it. And this is how it sounds without the processing. And then I just scooped out a little bit of that mid-range and a little bit of the high end. And that just makes it a bit more thumpy. And then added a little bit of reverb. And here you can see I've cut out the low end over here and also over here on the diffusion network. So we're only kind of getting reverb on the high end of the kick, and it gives it this nice like breathy texture. Okay, then we've got this rolling hat. And I've used MIDI here and volume or velocity automation to basically make the hats bounce a little bit. So you can see it goes from quiet to loud on the third hit and then quiet again. And you get this bouncing, almost like sounds like sidechain. And the hat that I'm using here is Close Hat 003, and I haven't really done any processing to it, any filtering or anything. It just sounded good out of the gate. What I did do was I added some random panning and some random pitch modulation, and you can do this over here in the controls tab. Just by turning this up, you'll hear each hit in a random position on the stereo field. So if I turn this up and exaggerate it, you'll hear it a lot more, which is too much, but I put it at 8%. And this way you're getting it moving around a bit more and it feels a bit more natural. Then I've also done this pitch modulation, and what I've done is I've used this random LFO, and then you just assign here what you want this random LFO to do. Make sure that retrigger is on. That way every time the LFO retriggers, every time a new note plays, you're gonna be hearing a different value, whatever that value is assigned to. In this case, pitch, that means you're gonna be getting a random pitch. And if I set this to like 100%, you'll hear exactly what it's doing. And that's obviously too much, but if we bring it down to like just 2%, ever so slightly it's changing pitch, and it sounds like somebody's actually playing a hi-hat because they would be hitting the hat in a different position, which would be slightly changing the pitch. Okay, and then I've got this real hat loop that I kind of chopped up. It comes from pack 2, and it is this hat loop 7. And originally it's quite a lot longer, but I just chopped out this portion over here and then repeated this little section here that's highlighted. And the reason for that was I just basically felt like the little flams in this groove were happening too often in the original. So here you can see I didn't like how often it was happening, so I just chopped out a little portion of that, like this piece over here, and basically just repeated it. And I also took out some of the mid-range here. Okay, then we've got this clap, And the clap I'm using here is SV Club 004. And here I've shifted it slightly before the beat. So instead of it landing over here, I've nudged it back a little bit so that it kind of sweeps into the clap. And you'll hear how that sounds compared to if I put it on the beat. Has a kind of a different feel to it. I didn't do any processing to this. It sounds great as it is. And yeah, there's nothing fancy about sequencing this out. It's just landing on every second kick. Okay, then we have this shaker loop here. Sounds a bit more like a tambourine, and I just like the groove of that, so I've layered it in there and done no processing to it. It sounded great, and without it and with, it makes quite a big difference to the groove. Okay, and then we have the toms. The toms are very important for the groove. Without them, it kind of doesn't have much bounce to it. So if I turn those off, it lacks that bounce. And so the toms kind of following those boom, ba-dum, bim, boom, doo-dum, doo kind of rhythm. So how you do that is you place a tom on the last 16th. So if I divide this up into 16ths, you place a tom on the last 16th of the first beat. And then you place the next one on the third 16th, and then you get this bounce. Okay, and the tom I'm using here, I basically just shortened it because it's quite long originally, and I didn't want it to run over the kick because they'll conflict with each other. So originally it's like that, and I've just shortened it and done a little bit of a fade on it. That's tom 13, and no processing on that. Okay, and then we've got the fills, and the fills help the loop kind of loop back around and bring you into a new section of the track, and I think they're quite important. So I've built this fill out of 3 different loops. So the first loop is this djembe loop 004. It sounds like this, and got no processing on that. I just shifted it to where it sounded good on the beat. So if I just turn these other ones off, to me that just grooved nicely. But it doesn't feel like much of a fill yet, so I felt like I had to layer in something else. And so I found this djembe loop, and I just cut out a little portion of that and put it sort of onto these 2 beats here. And so you'll hear how that adds to it. It has that nice hit over here on the last 16th, which kind of gives it a bit of swing almost. And then the last one I laid in this perc loop, which helps a lot. That fills out all the little gaps. Yeah, I didn't really do any processing to that either. So here you can see I just chopped out the first portion of it. Okay, so that's pretty much just the programming of the beat. Then what I did was I also put them all into a bus here, you can see, and added some reverb and drum bus, which really beefs it up quite a lot. And so I'll show you how it sounds with and without. So if I turn off this drum bus and the reverb, and then enable the reverb, puts everything like into almost like a room, small room. And how I achieved that was to filter out the high end and the low end of the incoming signal. So you can use this filter and just drag it around, and I just did this sort of shape over here. And then set the size really small. So originally the size is at 100. And you can't really hear the reverb because it's such a big reverb, and so it's happening far away, so you'd have to bring up the wet to really hear it and feel it. So turning the size down, you start to hear it. Okay, so that like kind of glues everything together, and then this drum bus really like adds about a bit of thickness to the beat almost. And I'll exaggerate it just so you can hear what it's doing. Now if I A-B between them, you can hear all the saturation and the drive, and that comes from these 2 dials, the drive and the crunch. If you want more of that like mid-range kind of saturation, the crunch is a great little control to get that quality, and I'll also turn that up so you can hear it. So you can really make like a really beefy sounding drum loop just by messing around with the settings in Drum Bus. But I went with a bit more subtlety over here. So I brought down the crunch and then brought down the dry wet to taste, and I think I had it around like 9%. I'd say 12% sounds good.
Hi, this video is sponsored by us. If you like these tutorials and want to support the channel, check out our website packed with online courses and professional sound packs. If you want to cut years of your learning curve, check the PML Beginner to Advanced Music Production program for Ableton Live. You will know Ableton inside out and learn how to write, produce, mix and master complete tracks. You learn step by step at your own speed, from an empty file to professional production, as if we're sitting side by side in the studio. Thank you for listening, and now let's get back to your tutorial.
Okay, the second groove is a bit more fun, a bit more interesting, I think, and this is the more like tech housey kind of groove. It's got a lot of kind of like swing and little groovy hits that are landing everywhere and just making it really bounce quite a lot. Okay, so let's take you through that. So the kick, there's nothing interesting about the kick. It's deep kick 22 and very similar processing. Again, I've taken out a little bit of the mid-range here and then added a bit of reverb. And then sequencing it out is just putting a kick on every beat. Okay, then we've got this open hat. And so I went for a more like techie sounding hat, the 909 sounding hat. I found this one and I just shortened it by using this fade out over here. So originally it's quite long, and you'll hear that with that long hat changes the groove quite a lot, and shortening it and just tightening it up I think made it feel, the whole thing just feel a bit tighter, so to speak. And you could have two different versions, so like the B section of the drop, you could open this up, and then having that longer hat almost adds a bit more energy. And processing wise, there was a little bit of low end in this hat, so I just filtered that out. And no other processing. Alright, then we have this shaker loop. And I've added swing to this whole groove. So you'll see here, we've got swing over here under the groove selector, swing 16th, 61. And you can find these grooves by searching AGR 16 and then go into all results, and you'll see you've got a whole bunch of different grooves. And if you don't know how the groove pool works, a quick rundown is basically these .agr files, which are just little clicks that are landing not on the grid like normal 16th. So if I make a new MIDI channel here and just show you how this looks and we can visualize it, swing looks like this, where we've got, where is this? Where we've got the, if we're looking at 16ths, every second 16th is shifted off the grid forward by 73%. 100% I think would be, I don't know if you get 100%, but yeah, it would be pretty much shifting it over there. So 70% of the way it's going over here. And I went for a bit more subtle groove. So I think I said I had 61 here. 61 looks like this. So there's a lot less swing, but you still feel that bounce. Okay, and how you apply these grooves to different things is you just double click on this and you can just drag it down into this little groove thingy over here, and it'll also pop up on your groove pool, and then you can adjust things like the global amount. This is how much of that swing you'll be applying, and also you can adjust things like timing and the velocity, because some grooves have a different velocity setting for each hit, so like you'll see it built in like that. So it'll also be changing the volume of the clip. If you don't want that, you can adjust the velocity amount here. But I would recommend just checking out the manual if you want to get a full rundown of the groove pool and how to use grooves. But they are very powerful and I do recommend using them. So you can hear without the groove, it's kind of quite straight, but with it, it becomes like almost drunk and sloppy, and it sounds really cool. Okay, then we have this close hi-hat. And these are just doing like random little hits here on the left side of the stereo field. I'm using this close hat 003, and I didn't put too much thought in these. I just kind of placed them at different velocities and felt where it felt good on the groove. So you can hear those in there. And I think with this, it becomes super subtle, so you can barely even hear them. Okay, then I got another close hat that's panned a little bit right here, you can see. And it's a different hat because I wanted it to sound different. It's a little lighter and a bit longer too. So with both of those together, and this is just repeating on that last 16th of each 4 beats of each bar. And you can see it's got the swing in there, so I don't need to apply the groove to it because that's going to swing it even further. What I would have done here is placed it and then applied the groove and hit commit over here, which will shift the notes forward. You don't have to do that. The groove still works if you don't commit it, but sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, just so I can visually see the swing. Okay, and then we got this shaker loop with all those together. Starting to get groovy, but it's not quite there yet. And these snares is where the magic starts happening. So these snares are kind of like landing at very groovy positions. So it's always on like a last 16th or the second 16th, which is very bouncy. And I'll show you with the hat and the kick. And then if we add everything else together, it's starting to groove quite nicely. Okay, and then we got this top loop. And this is kind of just filling it out a bit. To be honest, it doesn't add much to the loop. I'm not sure why I added that in there. You can barely even hear it. But it's there, and I think I'll keep it. And then we got this one. And so this adds a nice bit of length to the hat and just a bit of depth to that open hi-hat because it's kind of sitting in the background and it rings out a bit. So you can hear that, you can definitely hear it. It adds a bit of depth to the beat. And I haven't processed these top loops. Okay, the clap is very important in this kind of beat. You want it to be very tight and kind of up front. And so I layered 2 different claps together. I've got this clap 002 and this one here 004. And this one's adding a bit of like punch to the low end because it's got that, sounds like there's a snare layered in there or something. If you have a look at an EQ, you'll see that fundamental. And that's what I was after with that one. And then this is adding that tightness, that spank to the clap. And so you can hear how much these claps help the groove. So I didn't really do any processing to these. It's just about finding the right samples and layering them together. And these are the 2 that I used, so 002 and 004. And then what's also important is kind of after 4 bars, I repeat the clap here on the last 16th, making sure that it lines up with the swing. So here you can see this MIDI note is swung and I lined these up with that, so it's landing on the same exact position, so we don't have sort of like flamming or any weirdness happening in the groove. And so how that sounds is that little last one over here, and that's very typical of like techie kind of grooves. All right, then I've got this perk, which is just adding a little bit of high end. I think when you're building a groove like this, you want to find percussion that's sort of covering the whole frequency range. And that's why I've added in these claves. And yeah, I don't think I processed that. No, I didn't process that. That's just landing on basically where the first hat of each beat. Or of each 2 beats, sorry. And then we got this bongo. So that's kind of like the mid-range percussion. That's bongo 5 with no processing on it. And so if you play just the percussion together with the kick and the hat, you can hear how they're just landing on alternating hi-hats, and it's just, again, just building to this like call and response kind of groove. And then the tom is very important, and that's on the last 16th, nice and swung there. I think it's the same tom that I used previously in the other grooves. So you can see pretty much 90% of all of the bounce is coming from that really swung 16th. Add in these swung hats and the swung snare, then you're getting a really nice bouncy groove. Okay, and then we've got this perk hit here, which is also kind of like high up, but it's not very tonal. And so let's just play those together. Yep, no processing. I did do a little bit of velocity automation here. So now if we play everything together, okay, and then as for the processing, again, drum bus and reverb, so we're putting everything into a room. Same reverb as before, and then we're adding this drum bus again. This time we're on 100% on the dry wet, and you can hear just how much that thickens up the beat and glues everything together. Okay, then the final groove here is the organic house groove. And so this one is a little more interesting in terms of like the kick drum programming. And let me just play it for you quick. So yeah, if you just listen to that kick there, there's quite a lot happening there, but it's all very intentional and helps the groove a lot. So what I'm doing is, you can see the additional kicks I've placed, and they're usually at a lower velocity except for this one over here. And these ones are creating that kind of like do 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 kind of groove. And then this one is kind of just like this kick that comes and stomps in and adds just another emphasis on that offbeat. And if you solo it, it doesn't sound that great, but in the context of the full groove, I think it's really bouncy. And you can see this, if you compare this section to this section, there is a difference. I don't have that kick over here. And so, you know, you got this like A-B, A-B kind of shape. Okay, so that's the kick, and that's kick 022. Same processing as before. This time we don't have the reverb on it. And then we've got this closed hat. And so we don't want like that tech house hat anymore. This is more organic sounding, so I just chose a hat that sounded a little bit more realistic. And did a little bit of random panning to make it feel even more alive. And a bit of random pitch, just as we did before. Okay, then I got this shaker that kind of sweeps into the hat, into every other hat. And yeah, I think that just sounded cool. Kind of like sucks you into that hat. And so to do this, I took the shaker 002 and just reversed it. So if I hit R on my keyboard, it'll reverse the audio, but this is how it originally sounded. Oh, sorry. Oh, and I've got processing on, so this is how it originally sounded. So very different. So let me just turn that back around. All right, so I reversed it, and then it sounded like this. But I wanted to sound more like white noisy, more, yeah, I guess white noise is the word. So I took out all of that like tonal mid-range. So we just left with that, and then I added this erosion on the wide noise setting here, and then you can just drag this around, and I put it over here. And then it sounds a bit more like white noise. Okay, then we've got this shaker loop here. No processing on that. Then I've got this one, which is panned left. Again, no processing. And then I need something on the right, so I panned this one right. And so together it kind of fills out everything. You got this really nice wide shaker, and it sounds really nice in the mix. Okay, and then I've got this djembe loop here, which is kind of acting like a fill. So you'll see there's tons of percussion here, and I spent quite a lot of time just chopping up different percussion loops and layering them together. So they're all landing in different positions, and they're all serving their own purpose. So like the gist of this is where I like to try and fill in pretty much most of the little 16th note grid positions here with different hits. And so the first one is this combo loop. Sounds like this. And I'm just going to start layering in everything together. So I got this one, and then I added in this top loop 8 here. And then I got this 39 over here. And so they sound really disjointed when you start soloing them. But as we keep adding more and more together, it starts filling out, and eventually we get something like this. And then we add in the hi-hats, and everything else kind of just glues it together. So yeah, it's really this nice like call and response almost that's happening there. And then the final ingredient to glue it all together is this clap. Okay, so let me show you how the clap was made. So you can see there's quite a lot of layering that's happened here. So it's a really full sounding but tight clap. And so these are all the different samples that I laid together, but I basically took a whole bunch of different samples and made them really short. So the first one is this clap 1. And it was already pretty short. Then we've got this. This one's nice and wide, but it was a lot longer. So I've just shortened that to make it really tight. And then this clap, a bit more snappy. And then this one, which is shifted a little bit forward. And that's just giving that low, like, snare tone to the clap. So all of them together sound pretty good, I think. Then I just filtered out some of the high end and that mid-range. And yeah, the only other thing that I did here was I added a little reverse. So I took this clap and duplicated it, and then just reversed by hitting R on my keyboard, and then created this like little sweep and dragged it over there. And that just basically like sucks you up into the next clap, into the third clap. So if I play that in context. And you can see there's also a difference here in lengths between this one and this one. It's like a push-pull kind of, or A-B or call and response kind of thing that's happening. Okay, and then processing the entire loop together is the same as before. Got the same exact reverb and then drum bus, and in this case I also added a bit more saturator at the end. And so without the drum bus and the saturator, it sounds like this. Just a little, I don't know, blunt and muffled, not really like bright and rich. And so the drum bass brings it to life a bit more, and then the saturator even more. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something about drum sequencing and also processing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.